on the job of rebuilding the process of the presidency in the United States. So we're obviously here on an historic weekend, the beginning of a weekend, you might say. And what's particularly historic about it, to be blunt, is not people's hot dogs on Saturday, because Mr. LaRouche has indicated that Americans really need to regain their own sense of our tradition to be, in a sense, able to truly celebrate our American Revolution. But on Sunday, there is absolutely something which is occurring, which is in the spirit of the American Revolution, which is the July 5th referendum in Greece. And I'm sure we will hear some discussion about this evening. I want to point out a couple of things to people before we get underway here in a few minutes. And I'd like to welcome everyone who is getting on right now. This is John Asher, the host for many years of this conference call we've had. And in the last 6 weeks, the previous 6 weeks, we've had the honor and privilege for everybody on this call to be in a direct discussion with Lyndon LaRouche. And tonight will be the 7th of these Fireside Chats. So if you're just getting on, you know that for a few minutes I kind of talk away here until Mr. LaRouche gets on, and then we turn on the recording machine, and then we start. After Mr. LaRouche may or may not give an opening statement, and then we just go right at it in terms of questions and discussions from those who are on the call. And as you probably know, if you've been on previous weeks, we don't always get to everyone when they would like to ask a question, and we try to maximize participation to give many people as possible a chance to get in a question directly to Mr. LaRouche. And I'll just say to you, if you're on now, just so you know in advance, when you do get on to ask a question, you will get a little recording that says you are now on, or you're about to speak, something like that. And I would ask you, if you're asking a question to Mr. LaRouche, please speak directly into your phone. Do not use a speakerphone. We're trying to maximize the good quality in terms of the audio quality of the conversation and the recording afterwards. So again, this is John Asher in Leesburg, Virginia, welcoming everyone back. We are in a countdown this weekend. Obviously, we have this extraordinary vote coming up on Sunday, the referendum. On the website here earlier this evening, this very important statement around a breaking situation from Mr. LaRouche. Associated Press shames Merkel on Greece. LaRouche urges story to be spread. This is a story that appeared internationally earlier today on the post-World War II 1953 debt conference where Germany had its debt written off. This is actually an excellent article, and it indicates that right now the British financial oligarchy is being cornered. The situation, I think, very well is possibly breaking in the right direction, but we'll hear from Mr. LaRouche what he has to say about that. This is a dramatic situation. We are in the middle of this fight. Earlier this week in Astoria, in Queens, we were there in the Greek American area at a rally. Our statements are getting international circulation through Facebook, Twitter, and elsewhere. So again, like to welcome you if you're on this call for the first time. Also like to welcome all those people who are on the call listening via YouTube or got on via Facebook or Twitter. We welcome our friends and those who are following this movement who are connected through the World Wide Web. And you can participate in this discussion also this evening. And in a moment at 9:05, I turn off myself and turn on the button, and then we get going with Mr. LaRouche, and we will have a discussion with him after if he does, makes opening remarks. And again, I'd like to welcome everyone this evening, and I'm now going to do the beginning of this call.
This conference is being recorded.
Good evening, everyone. This is John Asher in Leesburg, Virginia, welcoming everyone to the 7th Fireside Chat with Lyndon LaRouche. And I'd like to welcome all of you who are here via the World Wide Web, over the Internet on YouTube. Welcome all of you who are on the telephone with us today. And let me see if we have our guest and featured speaker and honored guest here with us. Lynn, are you there? Lynn, if you can hear me, now is the time to speak because we're ready to get underway here. Well, let's see if we hopefully we'll have Mr. LaRouche on here in one moment. And we haven't had any technical difficulties up to now. So, Mr. LaRouche, are you on yet? Well, we are awaiting Mr. LaRouche arriving here. Lynn, are you available? Okay, Lynn,
Hello.
I think, yes, now I hear you loud and clear. Well, Lynn, this is John Asher. We have our audience on. They're assembled via the telephone conference call and on the internet. I'd like to welcome you back here this evening, Lynn. And okay, so would you like to make any preliminary remarks here to our friends who are on the phone with us this evening, Lynn?
I can one broad remark, which based on observations made by some other people who I know are responsible in this matter, that during the past week period, we have had what is for many people an astonishing outgrowth of participation in one form or another in our organization. So I can only say that, and maybe I could also add the fact that I've committed myself to have an additional international conference, which is based on Manhattan. And for a long time, it's been my intention, that is since last August, my intention is to move the center of our organization into Manhattan, and to actually bring an actual unified form of our organization, which we have not had for a long time. We've had separate organizations, and they run different things and do different things and keep secrets from us and so forth like that. So what we're doing now is moving toward the process of actually establishing what I've started in Manhattan, and henceforth I will not be in Manhattan personally, but I will hold myself responsible to report through channels which are centered on Manhattan as national channels. So that's what the change is, and you'll hear more about that in due course.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to, at this point, turn on my button, which is going to begin the question and A part of our discussion.
Q&A session started.
And for those of you who are on the phone, you can hit *6, and that will put you in the queue, in the lineup, to get a shot at asking a question to Mr. LaRouche. As I indicated a moment ago, if you are on there, please do not use a speakerphone. Speak directly into your phone, and please also, I would ask you to ask a question. For those of you who are on the YouTube and listening via the internet, you can send a message via Facebook and Google+, and you can also, if you're on YouTube, post a comment, and we're going to take questions from there and read them to Mr. LaRouche in the course of our discussion here this evening. So we are going to begin with the first person up, and please state at least your first name and where you're calling from, and here we are now going to go underway.
Okay.
Hello, this is Joyce Turner calling from New York City.
Okay, you're going to have to speak up because I cannot really hear you too well.
Okay, this is Mrs. Joyce Turner calling from New York City.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. LaRouche has recovered. My question is about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is a very controversial figure, he and his wife. But Mr. Clinton bombed a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan when he was president. He also sabotaged Haiti's rice production. Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, which has been victimized by the United States for many, many decades. And probably the only good thing Mr. Clinton did, in my opinion, was to pardon Mr. LaRouche from prison. But now Mr. Clinton seems to be very good friends with the Bush family, whom are criminals non-parole. So I am very unhappy about this situation. And I'm wondering how Mr. LaRouche feels about Mr. Clinton becoming so close, almost like another son to Bush Sr.
Well, of course, Bill Clinton, the former president, is not really a perpetrator in any such things. What Bill has done as a president is to create an organization, a funding organization, which is his own. Now, the relationship between some of the problems of his wife, Hillary, is a different question entirely, because actually she chose to become a devotee, what it became eventually, or temporarily at least, of Obama. And when Obama had orchestrated the deliberate murder of people, including those in operating in Africa, on that occasion, she went through quite a strange behavior. She lied. She lied in support and in allegiance to the president, Obama. And then she moved again, where Bill was, in a sense, Bill's her wife, and he has a natural affection for his wife. And that does not mean that while he has an affection for his wife and tries to minimize the conflicts, there are serious conflicts of interest between his candidacy and that of his own organization. Bill has to deal with this problem of what his wife does and how he's going to adjust certain things which are all the things that she's done wrong were done under the direction and force of Obama. Everything she's done wrong that I know of as existing, and I believe that's also true completely of Bill, that she has become a puppet of Obama. She may deny it, but she walks around and she actually acts as a puppet of Obama. She does not support any of the policies which Bill Clinton had presented while he was president. So I think you've got to clear the air a little bit and get the facts straightened out, because there are facts involved here. But that is not the issue. You've got to go to the core issue. You have a rotten presidency. A rotten presidency. Since Bill left office, you've had a rotten presidency. And that rotten presidency from two sets of presidency successively is what the problem is. All evil comes from that, as it comes to Bill Clinton. I have not always been in touch with Bill on this thing, because his marriage, which is also itself something I don't want to probe too much deeply into. But I know that what she's done, that she has made herself, in effect, a puppet controlled by Clinton, not by Mrs. Clinton, a puppet of Obama. And that's what the real issue is. I can answer to other things like that, but that's the central issue. That Obama, my objective, as in perspective, is that Obama must be thrown out of office now, not at some distant time, because we're on the edge right now of the very real activity of preparations for the launching of a thermonuclear war during the early summer months of this year. That means already the present month. And my purpose is to get Obama removed from office in time to prevent World War III. Now, World War III would not be like any other war except one, the war that didn't happen. There's a period there where Bill Clinton, others, were actually negotiating with the Soviet Union, which was then prepared to launch a thermonuclear war against the United States by an action to be taken against Cuba. The Kennedy's brothers, chiefly the president, of course, negotiated with the Russian ruler, and under the basis of the agreement they reached in the Cuba context, the Russian government destroyed all of its weapons, of a weapons system against the United States in particular. Therefore, since that time, the United States was fairly free of the threat of a thermonuclear attack on itself by any other source. But then recently, with the entry of the Bush family, which was temporary, especially Cheney. Cheney is, if you want to talk about an evil man, a satanic figure, that's Dick Cheney. Or we call him Dirty Dick Cheney. But also, Obama is a stooge of the British monarchy. He was brought into power by the British monarchy. He was a stooge of the British monarchy, and he has all the stinking attributes of the British Empire system. So, I mean, those are the facts. So your impression, of course, reflects some things that are said around, talked around, but when you get down to precision facts, as I know the facts, and I have some access in quite detail on the part of my experience that I had directly in my relationship to Bill Clinton while he was still president, and some contact directly, very little contact, but contact from him during the post period after that. After that, I had no direct contact with him, except for the time he left office and we had this little event, a celebration, handshaking event, when he walked out of the presidency. That was a fact. And that's the last time I spoke to him directly. But I followed his behavior. I know the background of his organization. I know many of the things he's done, not because I've had it directly, but because I'm in knowledge of a lot of things that tell me what the whole story is that's going on. Not the full story, but I get a lot of reports from reliable sources, and I have certain indications of what he's up to. I don't know everything he's up to, but I know many indications.
Okay, we're going to go to the next question here. And please give us your first name and where you're calling from.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Okay, hello?
Yes, this is
okay.
Brad from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Good.
Hi, LaRouche. I got a
Okay.
question regarding the interest rate decision coming up in September from the Federal Reserve. I was just wondering, what do you think is going to happen if they don't raise rates in September? What's going to happen to the dollar?
There's anything that is actually being presented, to my knowledge, from U.S. government or related circles of that nature. What I know is that we're right now, as long as Obama remains in the presidency, we are now in the immediate danger within these immediate months ahead, or maybe weeks ahead. And that will be, if anything, the launching of a global thermonuclear war, an event which has never happened before. This war, if it's launched, will be launched essentially by the British and United States under the Obama administration, specifically the Obama administration. And if we do not prevent that, if we do not get Obama thrown out of office now, in these immediate weeks and months, then you're going to probably be exterminated, because if any war breaks out, an attack by the United States and Britain on Russia, Russia will not launch a war against the United States or anything like that. But if the United States, under British influence, which means Obama's influence now, then the war will be an immediate war of a type which mankind has never seen except by what happened back then when the President of the United States then actually dealt with the Russians, the Soviet system, and called off a thermonuclear war by destroying the instruments of death which Russia had at that time. Russia not only gave up those weapons at that time, but destroyed them. And therefore, on that basis, a peace was reached between the United States and the Soviet Union under a negotiation directed by the President of the United States. So at that time. Since that time, that's been the general case. Now what's happened is the world has rebuilt up a mass of thermonuclear weapons for instant mass killing. And if it were to happen, the provocateur of that mass killing would be the current Russian Empire and its stooges, including Obama. If Obama is removed in time, it is not probable that such a war, a Holocaust, would occur. But if Obama remains in office as president, together with the retinue he has around his presidency, if that retinue and Obama are removed from power, and as the removal of a presidency will remove that power in that time, then I think the danger of a thermonuclear war, of the type that would cause the extermination of the human population, including the U.S. population, would not occur. And it's a longer story, but those are the brief essentials.
Okay, we're going to go to the next question up here. Here we go.
This is Bill Meehan. Question, one point. We just talked about the Glass-Steagall, and then we talked about the creation of whatever you want to bring about. My point here is very simple. We as a nation are not speaking truthfully as a group of representatives. Mr. LaRouche keeps talking about a lot of different things, but the biggest impeachment for Obama is the Benghazi. And why hasn't this been brought up to impeach him? The second biggest thing about Mr. Obama is credibility. Credibility is zero. And I'd like to hear what Mr. LaRouche is going to do in the future to bring about a concrete accomplishment of the Glass-Steagall Act, okay? Because we get Greece out of this and we get the whole world out of it, but I haven't seen anything happening. Please answer.
Okay, so I certainly shall. Look, there are some things that are not, your representation is not fully clear in detail, because it's much better. You referred to this North African operation where Obama actually ordered the assassination of U.S. president officials in North Africa. He did it. And he was the one who gave the orders to Hillary Clinton when she was in service, which broke her and has made her an intellectual wreck in many respects ever since. So that's part of the whole picture. But the larger picture is not simply one incident. It's not the North Africa incident, which is really an ugly thing. And Obama was exposed as a criminal fully on the basis of what he did in sending women in order to facilitate a hedge to cover over a mass murder operation, which started earlier, a short time earlier, murdered a whole leadership government and then killed several Americans of the diplomatic service, right, on president. And the President Obama wittingly knew that and supported it. Hillary Clinton was under great pressure not to identify this president as the guilty party who was the author of this thing. The danger that we have to face otherwise at the present time is relatively new in terms of its efficient representation. The present time is still the danger. The thing comes now from the British Empire, that is the British monarchy. The British monarchy is the essential instrument and has always been the essential instrument. Take the case of the 9/11 case. Who was responsible? Who created this case? It was the British. But it was also the Obama who was a tool of the British in this operation. Now we're faced with a case where the British Empire is attempting to set up the actual thermonuclear war, that is the potential of a thermonuclear war. In other words, if the United States under Obama and the Obama administration now were to act in this present situation, and a war would come out normally, because Obama is headed for a general war. That is, he's not the author of it. The British Empire, the British monarchy is the author. I mean, the British monarchy is the same agency which used Saudi puppets in order to effect what we call 9/11 today. And that's the problem. The problem is essentially the British Empire. And the problem is that you've had presidents who are outright agents of the British Empire. That is Obama, for example. He has been since he entered office. Even before he entered office, he's a British agent. Now, at this point, the British system has moved inside the influence of the institutions of our current United States organization by bullying all kinds of instruments of our federal system and other parts of the system under the aegis of Obama. But Obama is nothing but a stooge for the British Empire. But the action then becomes practically, yes, the British have set the whole thing up. The whole development has occurred to prepare the way for this operation. The operation, however, is the launching of nominally a intended nuclear assault on Russia. Now, an assault on Russia. Now, Russia has a quality of military capability in terms of nuclear weapons, which is at the top level on a world scale. They built that back up. So therefore, if the United States wants to launch a nuclear war on Russia and adjoining nations, the United States will in the same minute or the same seconds that the United States launches an attack on Russia, or a nuclear attack, and it will be a nuclear attack, not a super nuclear attack. Once that is launched, within seconds, the Russian forces will act. They will not act before that point. But if the U.S. government does that, makes that launch, within seconds, the buttons will be pushed. If that occurs, there won't be many Americans left alive on this planet in the following minutes after that. And that's what the problem is.
Okay. All right. So we're going to take another person up here.
Yeah, good evening. This is Jim from Michigan. I've been thinking over what you said some time ago about the turn of the century here. A number of persons and possibly institutions have been pushed aside or eliminated from the institution of the presidency. And my question to you is, do you think these persons and institutions can be brought to bear to outflank what is going on now, primarily on the direction of the overhauling the educational system, and also having an outreach for statescraft to the rest of the world for rebuilding our what am I trying to say, the how we connect with them as far as development?
Yeah, okay. The issue, I understand the issue. I think the issue needs a little more qualification. Without any contradiction of what you said, but I think something else has to be said in order to clarify the issue in full. All right, we're on the verge of a thermonuclear war. If, as I said, if the United States is still under Obama, and Obama has his way, then you will have a global war, not a local war, a global war. The global war will be virtually instantaneous. And that's what the situation is now. It would not be instantaneous if we had any kind of normal features in the U.S. government. But we don't have people in the U.S. government who actually have the position of command. And there are many people in the military, U.S. military service, who do have the qualities of judgment and inclinations which would be appropriate for the United States, even at this time. You would, if you eliminate all the people who are essentially associated with the Obama characteristic, you have to know that they're all British agents. And that's how the thing is working. So our problem is how do we deal with this aspect of it? What's our prospect? And I think we have a potentially winning prospect. But we have to get Obama out first. I'm not just repeating this as a monotonous thing. I'm saying this is what I know efficiently, scientifically, on the basis and intelligence basis. I know exactly what this problem is. That is the war threat. And the immediate thing before us is the war threat. Now, there are factors that go along with the war threat. For example, there is now recently an attempt to rape the Greek population economically. It's a complete fraud, and it comes from the British Empire. It's a British fraud. And Obama is part of the ticket involved in that. You look at his policy in terms of his relationship to China and the China region. He's part of that same thing, and the attack on China is also. Remember, China is the largest nation on this planet, and the most powerful in many respects. And so, therefore, China's on the list too. Other nations are on the list too as targets. All of this is in the short term. We're talking about a period of as short as 1 to 2 weeks. Maybe a little longer, maybe shorter. I don't think much shorter. It could be, but I don't think that right now. I think we have a very limited period of time to do things such as getting Obama thrown out of the presidency. And I think that if you can't get Obama thrown out of the presidency within the relative short time of 1 or 2 weeks, I don't think you're going to be alive. And most people aren't going to be alive. Because that's the way a modern thermonuclear war, or thermonuclear fusion war, will go. And we're on the edge of such a war right now. I don't mean today. It could be today, but I doubt that. But in the very near future, over the course of at least the summer months. The best chance we have to have options to correct other problems, apart from war, is to develop steps in collaboration with nations such as Europe, as well as other nations which are not supporting this, and to actually get the Obama administration thrown out of office quickly. Get them out of there, and get the whole crew out of there. And I think by also introducing as the measure of law, which we can use to the effect like a broom sweeping out a dirty floor, we can actually reinstall the original Glass-Steagall law of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The introduction of a Franklin Roosevelt action will be the key way to prevent a lot of the terrible things that are either already happening or will happen in the case of the Milky Way.
Okay. All right. We're going to take another question up here.
Hello, Mr. LaRouche. Dylan Addison out here in Corvallis, Oregon. I'm going to steer away from the impeachment of Obama because I think that point has been covered. And ask this question.
Yes, right.
and ask this question, which is actually similar to one I asked in the previous week. That is, which assumptions or axioms that we currently believe to be true would have to be overthrown in order to build machines that think creatively?
I don't think machines think. I think that mankind is able of crafting processes, not just machines, processes. For example, let's take an advanced scientific question, but which is a very real one right now in terms of effect. We now have a water system problem on the various parts of the United States. As a matter of fact, this whole thing is spread beyond the United States in different places, South America and so forth. Now, some people, desperados sort of kind, say, no, nothing can be done about it. We're going to have to kill people. And you have, for example, the governor of California has a prospect of killing people based on a mass killing. And he's spreading that around, and we have the people in, the Pope has been bought into this thing, not on that basis, but saying we have to reduce the population permanently. We have to go down from 7 billion people living on the planet. We have to reduce it quickly to less than 1. That's what the policy. That's the policy. That's the current policy. That's the policy, for example, of Obama. That's the policy of the present British government. So our question is, what do? Do we go out there and shoot these guys? Well, that is a very lousy kind of idea. What you have to do is you have to change the circumstances in ways which lead toward solutions. The solution is easy. The essence of the solution has the name of Glass-Steagall. The United States is bankrupted and looted by the scanning of that law. So Glass-Steagall is the essential tick in this thing, which if you get that law through efficiently, you have changed the economy of the United States for the better. What that means, a permanent change back toward a Franklin Roosevelt approach to history. Now, much has been changed in terms of technology since Roosevelt died. We've had some good presidents, but they didn't live very long. And we had generals who were great generals, and they were kicked out of office. Some good generals, but they were out of the functioning office. We had people in government. The Reagan administration, by itself, represented a good government. As a matter of fact, I was a member of it, not as an open official, but I was sort of a quasi-secret member of it in planning certain economic and military strategic matters. He was assassinated. He didn't die, but there were assassinations involved. But the effect of the assassinations that he didn't quite die of was he had the wrong vice president. It was Bush. And since that time, the Bushes have had a very important influence as instruments not as brains, but as instant. They don't have many brains. There was a Bush who had brains, Prescott Bush, the author of the family, and he was a traitor and thief and all those kinds of things. But his progeny, these children and so forth, that came out of that Bush family, was real Nazi-like trash. So if we actually take that approach and say, what if we cancel the kind of policies that are going on now, like the green policy? The green policy is killing us. The green policy is a poison. As our economy is being destroyed, the intelligence level of the average citizen of the United States, in generation by generation, is the quality of intellectual development of the American citizen has been precipitate, down, 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 down. And it's natural, if you take away scientific, technological, and related skills of production, and you have one generation after the other, if you have school systems that no longer work, they may function, but they don't produce anything useful. Now you get the kind of cultural trend which the United States has been going through since Franklin Roosevelt's administration, but especially since the time that the assassination attempt was made on a president that I was observing. And what we need is to understand what I think you're getting at, effectively, I'm just laying it out this way, is we take into account the technological, scientific, and related things, which in the course of matters would be the normal scientific and related approach, both morally and technologically, to move mankind's condition ahead. What we're now going is we're going into the destruction of the United States. We have an action coming out of Britain, which means to shut the population of the planet, the human population of the planet, down from 7 billion people to less than 1. That's the current policy of the British Empire. So what we have to do is say, go to the constructive solution. To fight against an evil is not sufficient in itself. It's actually a big evil like this. So what you have to concentrate on is what measures of policy, which are feasible measures of policy, scientific, educational, moral, etc., economic especially. And if we take these things, which are feasible things in the immediate future, we can compose, I think readily, with great confidence, we can compose immediately a package with the aid of other nations, such as China, other nations who will people in southern parts of the Atlantic region. China, so we have the means at hand. If we can bring nations together, or a certain number of nations together, specific nations, we have the means right now. Throw this bum out of the presidency, and anything that goes with it, throw it out. It's garbage, it's evil, it's a foreign thing that has no place in our history as a republic. Go back to practical measures of scientific progress and healthcare policies and things of that type. Above all, restore an education system that works, which is not a failure of the teachers as such. It was those who control the educational system. Universities, in large part, and in the poorer quality of universities, scientifically, in general. So we could, under a new presidency, it doesn't have to be some great genius coming out of the skies or something. We have the ability, we have the knowledge of technology, which if put to work in the same sense that Franklin Roosevelt threw the evil ones out of the American system by bringing in Franklin Roosevelt. What we need essentially right now is something that should remind us of the achievements of Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Okay, well, Lynn, as you referenced at the beginning of our discussion here this evening, there's been a radiation of statements that you've made and that Helga LaRouche have made over the course of this week, many of these in reference to Greece. And I have a question here. I'm just going to read it. It's very short, coming from one of our people listening right now via the Internet. The question is, Mr. LaRouche, what is your opinion on the Euro and the EU?
Okay, well, the Euro system now and the EU are essentially criminal overall. However, there are, let's take a practical case. We have some people in the German leadership who are very naturally, under Germany's conditions, are very close to the issues which divide the line between Russia and Central Europe. And this group, with some isolated or smaller groups in other parts of Europe, together with what we have in the United States in terms of the best minds that we have that are active today, we have the capability of dealing with this problem. The face at hand is the question of the Greek question. Now, the Greek question is not a specifically Greek case, but the Greek case is the central point of attention right now. And if the Greeks could be crushed, as the British Empire and some people in the government of Germany were to succeed in what these people intend, then you would have a destruction which would lead to the incalculable results. In other words, if the Greeks were murdered, and this is what the policy of the British is, but you have other people in Europe who are going along with it. And if that continues, and we're talking about days now, because the Greek crisis is almost immediate. It's in the week. That's the kind of span we're dealing with. If that were to occur, it would set off an ignition of a global warfare crisis because of the radiated effect of such an action. Now, if Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, and her stooge, shall we say, the financial authority, if they were removed from office, I think that there would be a tendency for the German political, scientific institutions, otherwise, to improve greatly in their own actions on this issue, on the question of the Greek issue. And I think that it is done properly. There is not real popularity about the things that are being done to the Greeks in terms of all of Europe. You have people all throughout Europe who simply don't know what they can do, which is the usual language, to correct this situation. If, for example, certain German officials, and I give this is close to the actual as I want to go at right now. If certain officials were to participate in encouraging the ouster of no less than 2 certain members of the German government, I think the voices of reason would be heard amidst Germans and others. Under those conditions, I think we can prevent or skirmish around the great danger. It's one of the most important things on our agenda right now. The result would be Germany still has a great potential, industrial potential. Its confidence in its potential has been collapsing at severe rates. Germany's at the point they can no longer withstand what's imposed upon them. And the German economy is one which still has a very high level, relatively speaking, of technological capabilities in production. We're about to lose those capabilities in Germany. The loss of those capabilities in Germany, which is something which is actually being pushed in effect today, would be another kind of signal that would set off all kinds of chaos. So I think that certain changes in Europe's structure, its political structure a little bit, a few adjustments, combined with the throwing of Obama out of the presidency, I think that combination of things would probably give us an option, give us some so-called leg room by which we can pull ourselves back to sensibility and solve some of the problems which I know can be solved.
Okay, we're going to take another question up. Here we go.
Hi, this is from Florida. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little bit distorted, but I have having trouble hearing clearly the resonance of your voice.
Okay, I'll try to speak louder. At any rate,
Yeah.
my question is, in regards to Greece, we see that the Greek people elected someone that has the voice of the people. And I feel that the United States tried to do that with Obama, but he quickly became a puppet under the bank and Wall Street and oligarch. And I believe that it's not just Obama that is the issue, it's the whole structure. So my question is, how can we constitutionally shut down all government structure to restructure it?
You can't. The point is, Obama must be removed. If he's not removed, you don't have a chance. Because Obama will have you in a war as soon as 1 to 2 weeks, a thermonuclear war. And it's possible that no human being would survive that war. So the Obama question is the key issue. You have people who in the U.S. government know that, but the problem is they don't have the guts to provide the kind of leadership which is required. So I will, like some other people, will come out openly on this. I come out with it openly because I have a scientific and related background to deal with just these measures. And I'm free outside the domain of those members of government who are under the current influence of the current government. I speak freely, and I will always speak freely. I don't like anything else but speaking freely. I will hold my breath when I think the issue is not urgent or when it can be dealt with by other means. But the point is, if you can't throw Obama out of his office, you have probably no prayer at all of surviving this summer.
Okay. All right.
I don't mean shoot him. I don't mean shoot him. I mean throw him out of office. It's much neater, less blood, less aftermath. Just throw him out of there. Expel him. Impeach the animal.
Okay, we'll take another question up here, Lynn.
Hi, this is Phil in Florida, and I've been a chapter coordinator for Veterans for Peace for 10 years, and I guess an insider, if you will, for the anti-war organizations in this country. And in order to have a chance of impeaching Obama, I believe you first have to have a call for it from the people. And I tell you what, it's been real tough with the anti-war movement, which is basically left only need apply. They've been co-opted to squash any call for impeachment for the war crimes, which the call was very strong when it was a Republican doing it. But now we're in an election cycle again, and the folks that did drift away from party are now retreating back to the respective reservations. I'm out of ideas on how to get a call for impeachment, Mr. LaRouche. So I'm gonna shut up and listen.
Okay, all right. I don't think I know what you're saying, But the way you describe it won't work. You have to throw this monkey out of the White House. And you have to understand what happens. This is going to be a bit explanation, but it's important that you get the true answer and not the so-called approximate answer. Look, the United States is bankrupt. That's a fact. You can know that. Everyone can know that, because everything is getting much worse at an accelerating rate in the economy. The Obama administration has been the worst thing so far. The continuation of the Obama administration is perfectly a death judgment on the American people. So if you can't remove Obama, if you don't know how to remove Obama without shooting him, which is not a good idea, if you can't do that, then you've got to sit back and say, I don't have an insight solution for this thing. And I think what you've said to me just now is exactly that. You don't have an insight solution for something which you know should be something that should happen. There we agree. You have a desire for this. I share that desire. I know something about that, how to get that desire realized. Essentially, what has happened, you've got to think. Think carefully, because I know a lot about this, and I think it's very important to the kind of question you've asked. In the history of the United States, we went through a struggle from our revolution, the development of our presidency, which has been a very difficult road. We've had the first 4 presidents who were no damn good at all. We finally had a good president in the 40s. Then we didn't have any more good presidents. Then we had Abraham Lincoln, and we had a great general who led the war against the British, that is the Confederates. And the Confederates were the British agents. That was a crisis. We went through various things. We had some of our best presidents were assassinated. Like we were most commonly the 2 brothers and other people. The shootings of presidents, the assassinations of presidents, the other crimes against people. These have been done as instruments to control the minds of the American people. But all during this period, from the beginning of the 20th century, the general trend of intellectual development and scientific development of the American population as a population, and still some people were geniuses, but most of them were just a population. And they became more and more demoralized. If you look at the case of the school systems, for example, look at the 20th century school systems. Look at particularly after Franklin Roosevelt. After Franklin Roosevelt, the intellectual level of the United States has degenerated. We've had presidents, or attempted presidents, who had great qualities of leadership, but they didn't get elected, or they weren't able to stay in office. The problem is, therefore, today, our school systems in most of our universities are actually junk shops, intellectually junk shops. They are a waste of time. That's what's happened to us. So now you've got a population of human beings, American citizens, for example. And these are completely confused. They've completely lost any sense of authority, of their ability to judge how society must make decisions. We've lost that. We have a few people who remember that, who know what this material is. But most of our population has been driven generation by generation. What has happened intellectually since the death of Franklin Roosevelt and a bit later, each generation, like 20 years of age, each 20 years of age, or approximately that, has been a lower level of intellectual capability on the general case, including university students, graduates, has been inferior in its intellectual powers to think reasonably with respect to where we had been relatively at the end of the 19th century. That's a fact. Therefore, the fact these citizens who still are able to think have been deprived of access to the instruments of their profession. That is, the knowledge that they need to have the access to the kinds of work, jobs, for example, they need, or professions they need, and they just limit. They're awed by an increasingly evil presidency system. The Bush family, for example. And today I find that the typical citizen is intellectually far superior in insight and judgment than there was when I was born, back in 1922. And all the great geniuses that I once known, they died out in the normal course of events. They died out, they got older, or they got diseases, they got problems, and they died. People die. But the important thing for us is to maintain from generation to generation a population which is not only going to progress, but can actually recoup what they had lost in earlier generations. Our average student in schools, from little kids all the way to graduates, are less able to think competently than 50 years ago or 25 years ago. And the Bush presidencies have been no use in that case whatsoever. So we have had a process of systemic miseducation, distortion of fact by the major press. Oh, sometimes they tell the truth. Most of the time they don't. They're practitioners, they're opportunists. Therefore, what's the situation? What we have now is we have a few people I know of who I'm looking at as possible prospects to become the next president of the United States. Now, I'm not just concentrating on selecting one person who I think might be a good president, because I don't think it works that way. I think what works for the United States, as history has shown, is that if you have a population, a solid population, which is improving in its intellectual powers, going against the trend, people who are leaders who can evoke from people a realization that they too have the potential within themselves to rather rapidly understand how to think about these matters. And therefore, the problem we have here is the challenge is to produce a leadership now, which means a new presidency of the United States. Now, a new presidency of the United States is not a person. It involves a person. Now, we have, let's say, one or possibly two people I know of who are inclined to appeal to a presidential election of themselves, or immediate associates of them, who are possibly capable of providing a leadership which is much needed. What's the need? The typical citizen has been deprived of the means to have access to the kind of knowledge and the experience required to reduce the actual result we need. So therefore, we're looking at the idea of finding people in our system of government and related things who, as a team, can lead us on the way to a turning upward in development. I'm not going to name names, but I do have some very definite names, and I have a lot of names I would say don't belong there. So therefore, what we have to do is create the kind of atmosphere, intellectual atmosphere in particular, moral atmosphere, in which we can create a leadership group, not as just a person, this person, that person. It has to be a leadership group which can create and assemble what was done, well, by Alexander Hamilton, for example, in his association with George Washington. And it was George Washington, but with the advice and counsel and direction of Alexander Hamilton, that the United States was created under the people who were part of the southern population of the United States, of what had been the United States. they tended to go to pro-slavery attitudes. Huh? And it was only a few parts of the nation who actually had the guts and intelligence to create what became the United States over the course of the past 2 centuries. And therefore, what we're looking for is the assembly of a relatively small number of people who have the guts and qualifications to bring the people in general into an understanding of the opportunity which can be presented to them and delivered. And we had that with Franklin Roosevelt. You go in the case of Franklin Roosevelt, what you have. Once a great president had been assassinated, up until the time that Franklin Roosevelt was introduced, the United States was a piece of junk politically. It's terrible. Franklin Roosevelt saved the United States. And after that, there was a bum's rush. As soon as they found he was going to die, that he died, on the day he died. And I was, I'm familiar with a couple of people who were walking down the aisle on the moment he was about to die. And I know what happened immediately after they walked up, 2 people, down that corridor, away from a president who was about to die, Franklin Roosevelt, and the changes that occurred with the Truman administration. And the Truman administration was a disease from which the United States has never fully recovered. So therefore, that's the point. You have to have forces in power, like Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt took the United States, which was about to be destroyed, by part of its own government. Franklin Roosevelt challenged those people in the government successfully, even though he was, the sickness he had from his polio sickness was tremendous. But while he lived, the United States was a great institution. The minute he died, even with great generals present, still there, and great leaders, political leaders, the virtual assassination of Franklin Roosevelt was a downturn in the history of the United States. There were other presidents, like Jack Kennedy, for example, who tried to do that. Eleanor Roosevelt sponsored, provoked Jack Kennedy to become president. Then he was assassinated. Then his brother was assassinated. In the process, there was a vice president who was a qualified president, as presidents normally named go, but didn't have the guts to deal with things that he should have dealt with. And after that, I got my experience with the inside of the presidency was when I was on the inside of the Reagan presidency, which was a short period. I ran a certain operation, an international operation, for the presidency at that time. I was given free hand in what they knew I was doing. And they got rid of me as soon as they could. And that's the way things work. So therefore, you have to understand that what you need is to understand not just individuals. You need to understand the composition of societies, how a nation can bring itself together and to assemble a leadership from its own ranks, from the people who are best qualified to make those decisions, who have the inclination to do that service to the nation. We're all going to die. Every one of us is going to die. Right? That's pretty well established. We have no great miracles much on record up heretofore. So therefore, we're living sometimes for longer lives, as I am, or shorter lives. We go through a process. And the process is what we can contribute to the future. And therefore, we want people who can contribute to the future, who can inspire larger parts of the population to recognize an opportunity. This is what happened with Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt took the United States, which was about to be destroyed. Franklin Roosevelt destroyed really the forces that were destroying the United States. And recently, we haven't had any of those forces, like Franklin Roosevelt, who would have destroyed the Bush administrations of the United States. And so therefore, that's the point. You've got to get the confidence of a people who are totally lacking in any confidence that they're able to solve the problem. You've got to find a bunch of people who become a leadership of the United States in terms of the political functions and related functions. And we need such people to re-inspire our despondent general citizenry into feeling potent again. What we want is potent things. Now, what we want, therefore, is some simply defined solutions, which are true solutions, which will turn the corner and give our people, our citizens and their descendants, give them the confidence to act, to take the kinds of evidence needed to be considered, and bring that attitude there. But this depends upon assembling, which is the whole idea of creating a presidency. The idea of creating a presidency is to create a concert of leading people, a team which is qualified to work closely intermeshed with a leadership, a political leadership of a nation and beyond. And to by that means, to give the people of the United States the confidence to discover in themselves what the miracles they are capable of producing once that happens.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, here we're going to go to the next question.
Yep. Yeah, I think we answered the question for them in this case.
And you answered quite a few questions in that answer, Lynn. No doubt about it. Here we're going to go to the next one. Here we go. Here we go.
Yes, are you able to hear me okay?
It's a little bit muffled, but go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Hold on. How about now?
It's good.
Okay, great. Lynn, this is Alvin from New York. Let's see. In listening to tonight's call, I'm struck, and as someone who is an activist and seeks to try and organize people around the ideas and what's required, there's just, you mentioned, and we just were talking about the intellectual nosedive of the nation over generations, and I was certainly a part of that going into the 60s. And that we just seem to be running into the blocks. I think that the references of the questions and so on, it's reflective of the types of things that I find myself running into regarding, while, not unimportant issues or good questions, they take a practical form, and you're holding firm on the realities that have to be faced. And people have to struggle with that, and we run into that a lot, or I run into that a lot. I've just recently come to begin to get the understanding of the necessity of classical music as a road to improving one's intellectual powers, where then reality can be addressed, and that means then you can have a chance to deal with the crisis and even then look toward the future. So there's just a certain amount of, which you handle as you do, but a certain amount of frustration when I hear things that tend to be practical. And I'm just asking for further insight into how we can do better in helping people that would really like to do good, but want to be practical instead.
You're right. That's the mistake. The mistake is, now, for example, we have in the New York area, we have people who are senior veterans of the educational process. And as you probably know from your experience, there was a group of teachers over several generations who, in the New York area in particular, created a leadership among the citizens of New York. In other words, people were going to school. They were coming from immigrant categories and things of that sort, and they were going to these schooling processes and cultural processes that went together with that, like music and so forth. And this produced a population which had a very significant potential. The citizenry of the ordinary persons, forget the rich people as such, the ones who wanted to get all the money, but the typical citizen who wanted a meaning for the future of their lives for as long as that would exist, who had the idea of having people who would outlive them and look forward to what those people might contribute to the future. It was a typical idea. You could go through Manhattan areas and you would find whole areas which are characterized by this. We had also in Manhattan, we had an excellent school system within the structure. At my age, in my age of age, then it was continued a little bit beyond that. We had certain leading universities, which were not always things I would approve of, but they had a high standard of education, and universities and so forth, and other institutions, and it was there. So you had an intelligent population in Manhattan. You had other people there, but I forget the other people. Everything that's good is going to be based on the good people, not the slobs. And therefore, you had people who were not rich people, who were citizens more than anything else, but who had skills, who had experience, and so forth. And we lost that. We lost the authority of the typical member of society throughout the United States. New York City has been a relative exception as a model. What's happened recently in Manhattan area around there, I know about that. I know the horrible stories that are developing now. I know the horrible things that have happened. But I know that my view is, if I had to live, I don't live in New York right now, but if I had to live again in New York City, and where I lived, for example, in Boston area and so forth, I can tell you that the highest standard, moral standard, of any part of the United States, of any large part, or maybe local exceptions, but large parts, was New York City, Manhattan. And that's been the case up to this time. Now, I know what the conditions are in Manhattan from then, when I lived in Manhattan, when I was actually a consultant in various things in Manhattan. And I know what the changes were generally, has been since that time. And I know other parts of the nation. I know what the culture is. I know what the population is. I know what the kind of people are there in the different areas of the United States. By some people in California, good people. Some people who are not so good. People elsewhere. Even a few Texans are good. I know them personally. They were actually good. We have a lot of them who aren't. And we have a lot of them who are just confused because, Hispanic population, which is more or less under some degree of reduced authority. And that's not good nourishment for any population. Other parts of the hardcore of the Confederacy, its legacy, is in general a real problem. It has a quality of evil in it which astonishes me, even to this day. The Confederacy, which was created by a certain presidency, shall we say the third president of the United States, was a very evil man who created the development of the slave system in the United States during the time of George Washington. He was the chief enemy of the Washington administration within it. So I've known these things. I know them actively still today. So the answer is that we have to talk in those terms. When you get to a deep background, what's wrong with us? Where did the wrongness happen to us? What was good? And I say that in the case of Manhattan, I feel more confident about the nation in respect to the role of Manhattan and its history, and people who are now almost my age, but not quite. And that is really a gold mine of humanity. We have in other parts of the nation, we also have the same kind of gold mine of humanity in our citizenry, those who've survived. But they're relatively fewer. And therefore, it always has been, ever since the foundation of our system of government, ever since then, that the Manhattan area has been the center of the greatest moral force concentrated in the United States. And that's one of these things. So therefore, what do? I look at the people, like some of the ordinary people from the street, who are sort of in age now. I look at some of the senior people. I look at some of the people who are school teachers, senior school teachers, who are still alive, who are still participating in the educational process. These were the kinds of people, well, to me, were my people, the people that I felt comfortable with. They were not the only people I felt comfortable with, but the greatest degree of concentration ever since Alexander Hamilton to the present day in New York City has been, with all its faults, with all the crap that went on there, with all the criminal things that were done there, remains. Manhattan is actually the point of inspiration, which I look at often to check on, see what condition it is. Because that's the model, the Alexander Hamilton, George Washington model, which created the presidency. And that's what I looked at, that tradition. And it's that tradition, with all the scientific developments and other things that happened since then. That's the secret.
Okay, we take another person up here. Here we go. Hello?
Yes.
All right, I unmuted somebody, but he's been on hold there for some time. He may not realize he's unmuted. Hello, go ahead.
Is he unmuted?
He's unmuted, but I think he doesn't realize it. We'll have to just get somebody else. And here we go. Okay.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Hi, Lynn. This is Steve Mack from New York City. And this may sound like a silly question, but since we have so many British agents in the U.S. working for the British Empire, how come we don't have American agents in the U.K. working for the Americans?
Well, I would say the UK is the problem, because guess what? Wall Street. You got the southern part of Manhattan, right? You've got buildings there. Alexander Hamilton is buried there. Huh? He's celebrated there. What do you have next to it? Wall Street. The problem of Manhattan is Wall Street. You know what you want to do? You want to save Manhattan? You want to save the reputation of New York City? Eliminate Wall Street. It's the one thing we never needed and caused the greatest damage to our country of any single other process.
Okay, we take another person up here. Here we go.
This is Greg Witherspoon.
Yes.
In St. Louis. I have a question for Lynn. I'll start it with a little statement, though. I think your analysis of where we are in terms of the intellectual capabilities of the American population is right on point. I do, however, believe that we've actually gone through an intellectual phase change. And because of this, the way that we communicate, trying to intellectualize, if you will, with the general population is failing to touch them, which is why I believe that the art of poetry along the lines of parables and allegories are what we're going to be needing in order to spark in the population the type of ideas that will help them to understand the real measure of the situation in which we're in right now. For instance, here in the Ferguson area, there was just a report given out, and it speaks of the atrocities committed against the general population, but the general population doesn't understand that those are the same atrocities that were committed against individuals by the Nazis, and thus they have no sense of calling for the type of justice that should come out of that. And I would like to say that I think we have to be extremely careful when we're talking to a population who has lost, if you will, that intellectual kind of balance. As much as I disagree with President Obama, and as much as I disagree with his policies and all of those things, I think that when we begin to refer to him as a monkey, that sends a certain message to a population who doesn't think in terms of rhesus monkeys and experimentations and those type of things. That sends a very literal message to them. And so with that said, I'd like for Lynn to just respond in terms of this phase change that I believe we've gone through in terms of intellect and the usage of parables and allegories in a poetic way to help this general population re-spark their spirit, their heart, for what has to be done.
The problem is that the recipe that's delivered does not function. That what you need to do is you have to understand that mankind's ability to advance depends upon a certain very specific kind of development. For example, you cannot be practical as such. Practical people who esteem themselves as being practical are failures inherently. Because the achievement is generally in the form of education. Now, for example, let's take a case of a historic case. During a certain period of my life, I always, of course, was opposed to the Confederacy. I am, to this day, a devout and impassioned hater of the Confederacy. Why do I hate the Confederacy? Well, because of a president who helped make it. He was the third president of the United States. He was a criminal, and who had 4 presidencies in a row which were a criminal. And once George Washington had dropped out. And then we had about 4 generations later, we had a president who had only 1 term in office, but he was one of the greatest presidents we ever had. But Jackson replaced him. And Jackson was a piece of degeneration. And everything that Jackson did was the worst kind of evil. And in general, the southern population of the United States was saturated with evil. Whites were degenerated by what they did to slaves, or what they were told to do. The Confederacy itself was a great evil. There's no other word for it. It's a great evil. It was a British agent, controlled by the British agents entirely. And we had a great war inside the United States to try to remove that evil. And we didn't succeed. We had some successes, though. For example, one of my involvements in this nature dealing with the Southern problem. And the Southern problem is a term I hate. It's what we had. We had certain people who had been formerly slaves. They had a history of slaves. They came out of slaves by liberation in southern states and sometimes moving up in other areas. They became some of the greatest geniuses among our artistic population in the United States, particularly in music, but also in science and so forth. The whole thing is a whole record. And I happen to been involved in people now dead, but I lived actually with, who were some of the greatest musicians and had other talents of the United States. And they had been coming out of slavery at the time of the Civil War. The become the greatest intellects of the United States. So this idea of gradual evolution doesn't work. Yeah, they had a great passion. Those who did this, they had a great passion. Well, that's understandable. But the passion was they were not degenerated. They had not caved in to the submission of massa. But they had been subjected to that for generations under the regime established by the third president of the United States. That's evil. Then you look at the education system that's supplied. Take the Hispanic population, the poorer part of the Hispanic population in the United States. Look what happened to them. They were exploited as cheap labor. What's happened to the southern states? The same thing goes on. It's not the same form, but the stake is the same. What's the educational quality in that part of the United States? Now look at other parts of the United States. We have to go through the Hispanic, lower income brackets of Hispanic population. We go the ex-slaves in the United States. We go there. And now look at the genius that was expressed within one generation by people who had been slaves, or actual geniuses. That's the standard. How do you make a genius out of a person who's been condemned to slavery? When they react with a willingness to kill the slave owner that controls them, if they have to fight their way out of slavery. And that's the spirit that won as much as we won out of the Civil War. The assassination of Lincoln, for example, is one of the things that prevented this thing from going further in a better way. Now, we look at the history of the United States. Look at the quality of education in schools in the United States. Now, I'm an expert on education. I've had a lot of exposure to education. I've done a lot of scientific work. No, it doesn't work. That doesn't work. What you really have to do, in order to do that, is as people who had been slaves, who got out of slavery and came out as geniuses. And you've got no excuse to present to them. They were willing to kill. They didn't like to kill. But if they had to free themselves from slavery and were threatened by massa, they would kill, and they did. Not often, but sometimes, under justified conditions. If you know about that, and you know what's happened to the so-called colored population of the United States, as I do, you don't give much credence to the improvement of the culture of certain people who have been abused and lured into acceptance of values, of social values, which are not fit for mankind. The problem is, for example, today, in the educational system throughout the United States, with some relatively rare exceptions, there's not a decent teaching program going on anywhere, except in a few very rare cases. And if you keep people in that condition, cultivating that kind of education, cultivating that approach to life, of adapting, giving in, adapting, being smart, ducking and waving, it doesn't work. That I know that what you have to do, you'd have to depend upon people who will fight that crap. I know how to fight it, know when to fight it, when not to get into a fight. But then there are times you know you're going to get into a fight. You hope it's an intellectual fight, not a fist fight, not a knife fight or something like that. But you've got to get people to change themselves, not to try to adopt and get a cover to hide their identity. Now we have the means, and as you've spoken, you have the means You have the means, if you have enough people around you who share that view, you have enough intelligence, you manifest it already to mean itself. You have the intelligence needed to do that kind of stuff. But will you do it? Can you do it? Can you develop in yourself the ability not to adapt, not to go do crazy things, but not to adapt bad education, bad ideas, bad music. And most people in the United States don't have any knowledge of good music. What they call music is not. What you see, the popular music today, it's a disease. It's not music. It's not. What we need is a real cultural development. What do you mean by cultural development? The power of the human mind to develop the ability to change. For example, give a problem. Right now we have a water problem in the United States, in particular. There's other parts of the world too. Serious one. There's no water shortage. Why is there a water problem? There is no water shortage. For Earth, no water shortage. Well, it happens a lot of the Earth depends, in part, on the galaxy. And most of the water that mankind has available to mankind's use, is in the galaxy. And we have process, when we study the galaxy process, the galactic system, we know what's some other problems about water. We talk about water. Well, what about raindrops as opposed to respiration? Well, how much water that flies above the skies all over everywhere you live, how much water is flowing over there? Why are you short of water? Because you haven't turned it into functional moisture. A skill. There are methods to know how to do that. So therefore, if you want to be a practical person, you're an idiot, because you don't know what to do about this class of apparent water shortage. You have the governor of California is an idiot. He's a nasty idiot. His father was a good man, an achieving man. He's an idiot. He's a killer. He's demanding a reduction of the population of California, saying there's not enough water. Cut out people out of access to water. Destroy their lives, destroy their handicaps, all for his sake. And his intention is expressly, publicly, is to kill off most of the population of California and some other states as well, on the pretext there's not enough water. There is plenty of water. We have the scientific technology which allows us to do that. So why don't we do it? So we don't know how to do that. Now the secret. You don't know what to do to save your own butt. Then you try to be practical. You try to adapt to what other people think. And you've lost the ability to fight. You may have an excellent mind in those ways. You may have excellent opinions and desires. But do you have the capacity to recognize what it is you have to do to be successful? And submitting to other people's standards of education and entertainment is not the way to win. I will win for you if I can. I'll give you everything I can to have you win. That's what I believe I should be doing. But don't get practical. It doesn't work. It never did.
Well, Lynn, I think this last answer really brought a lot to the discussion. I wanted to see if you had any closing remarks here for those of us who are on. We still have an audience on the phone and on the internet, and I wanted to see if you have any last words for us here this evening.
I sure do. Look, this all goes to one thing. We didn't have much debate back and forth as we've often had in these discussions. I think the questions that are posed are, by their nature and by the time these has occurred, that things have gotten tougher. and people are not so relaxed as they had been in earlier days, even recent days, even recent weeks. Therefore, we have to shift the discussion upward, away from simple, what are purely simple explanations or simple opinions about this or that. We have to get much more serious about actually saying we need a leadership in the United States from within the ranks of the United States as well as the federal leadership. We need a group of people who are going to, in a sense, stand forth and look at what they should be able to do things. I dealt, for example, the question of the war question. That Obama is intrinsically the most immediate danger to the very existence of the citizens of the United States today. Now, I don't propose to shoot him. That's not a good idea at all, to throw him out of the presidency. That's a very good thing to do. The question is, will you do it in time? Because in the next couple of weeks, it may be the time within which you will see forces of the United States and the United States government, and they're now moving in that direction. Those forces are moving in the direction of this present month, where they are very close to launching a thermonuclear war. A thermonuclear war will be over very soon. And the number of survivors is highly questionable. It's very unlikely that the population of the United States will survive a thermonuclear war, if it happens. Because it will happen initiated by Obama as the President of the United States, as the Obama, the instrument, which will launch the war in cahoots with the British Empire. They will launch the war. Once that war is launched, it will be from the beginning, from the very beginning. The first thing will be the launching of a general thermonuclear attack. It will happen immediately. Seconds later, after the United States forces, under the command of Obama, have launched that war, Russia will have responded to a war it does not intend to have, but is prepared to deal with. Once that happens, the whole planet is going through the kind of war which mankind itself may not be able to survive. And certainly whole parts of the planet, like the United States, won't survive at all, because it will be one of the major targets. But it happens in one blow, contrary to all rumors and double talk. It'll happen. And therefore it's extremely important that we understand what the problem of leadership is of nations. We've come to a time where the extinction of the human species by willful action by mankind is an immediate proximity of now. And therefore, my approach to these things deals with what I know to be reality, not fantasy. I know that if we prevent Obama from becoming president, we probably can thereby prevent a global thermonuclear war, just by removing him from office. Because there's so many people in the United States who would not support such a war, at even high levels, as long as he was not president. That's a reality. It's a reality which we're looking at right now in this month. We don't know what date exactly, so nobody ever really knows that. Even the people who go on this thing don't even know it. But when it happens, once it happens, then everything becomes precisely known. And very short, very quick. Seconds. Mere seconds can mean the extinction of much of the human race. And if you don't understand that problem, you're not in the real world. And therefore, I could give you a lot of explanations for a lot of things. I have a certain amount of experience in a lot of things. But I'm telling you now that all the things you think you know boil down to one result. Are we going to have an Obama removed from the presidency of the United States in time? How is he going to be removed? I don't know. But he has to be removed. Is he going to be, am I going to shoot him? No, by no means. Doesn't mean any difference. If he's president, whether you kill him or not, it doesn't mean anything. Because he'll be dead anyway. He launches something like that, he'll be dead automatically. Why? Well, because Russia will be dead in a few seconds or less than a few seconds after that's launched under Obama. Then Russia weapons will hit the United States, and Obama will obviously be a prime target. And, by coincidence, but this is reality. Therefore, you have to address the remedies to prevent that, which do the job, knowing what the problem is that you have to defeat. In this case, yes, Obama is not the author of the war. He's the instrument of it. He's the push button of the war. And he's operating under the orders of the British monarchy. And recently you've seen that the British monarchy is determined to exterminate much of the human population, to reduce it from 7 billion people to less than 1. And that's the authority, because Obama was always a British agent. And he's operating under orders from a British agency. And anyone in Washington really knows the inside knows that. And therefore, that's the issue on the table we're talking about within the coming couple of weeks, or something like that. We're on the footsteps of a general thermonuclear war, launched by the British forces, on behalf of Obama as the instrument they choose. And then you'll get a response at that point once the launch is made against Russia, which is planned, and China. Then, at that same second, virtually, the entire world global thermonuclear weapons cache goes into action. That's what you're faced with. And we can stop that. And if we don't stop that, there's not much meaning to life. So that is the thing we have to do. Now, there are a lot of other things that have been brought into consideration on that account. There are many things, lots and lots of things, which have never been discussed openly, generally in the general population, but which are essential. We've lost much of our ability to think. Do you know what's happened to our successive generations of young people? The degeneration of the culture, the degeneration of their knowledge, the degeneration of their skills, their ability to produce, their ability to solve problems. These are the things which should be on the agenda. Keep the war off the agenda, especially the thermonuclear war.
Okay. Well, I think you've given everybody a lot to think about here, Lynn, and this is drawing to a close here. Okay. That's the end of our call here this evening. We look forward to talking to you again next week. This was our 7th Fireside Chat with Lyndon LaRouche, and we will get the recording out to everyone tomorrow. So thank you very much, Lynn, and we'll be back with you soon.
Hey, have fun.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Okay, here we are.
Goodbye.